Okay, when it comes to setting levels on this Allen Heath mixer, for our individual channel levels, the gain, trim, or in this case straightforward labelled level, you'll see on the Pioneer they're labelled trim. Move that up in the light a minute. See that? Labelled as trim. And they're basically the pots that are on the top of the fader travel. The top of the fader's travel past the EQ to the very top, and it's usually the same setup. The very top of each channel is usually where they are, and they control the level, input level of, let's say volume, but I suppose the correct term would be gain. It's how loud your track is. You set the level with those. Show you an example on this Allen Heath mixer. l.e.d meters, 0 dB. Take a grip, move the forward, you put more level in. You see the red LED lighting up there telling you that's clipping, it's too loud. You bring it back, lowers the level. When you set your tracks at 0 dB, bring it up to the next LED, which is flashing now, the +3, and then slowly back that off until it's winked out, and then you know you're as close as you can be to that 0 dB. Now on this mixer, on the Allen Heath, the master level is up here, and it tends to be, the calibration tends to be, it's about a bar or a single LED bar below that of the input level itself, so it's not quite in line. So when that one's on, when you set your tracks to 0 dB, the master output tends to be a bar behind, about -3. So I use that to monitor, like I've mentioned before in the previous video, the mix, so it doesn't rise too high during the mix. We try and keep that as uniform as possible. It's good enough for that. I can do that. When we come to the Pioneer, this is a small 2-channel which I keep as a spare. You can see on this that you've got the master level for the main output is in the middle, running up there, and you've got, I don't know if you can just zoom in, it's a bit hard to see there. You've got the 2 bars just outside here, running along here by the increments on the other side here, and those are the 2 individual channels level metering, as basically the same as this here for the individual channel would be these 2 on the outside, and the same as this, the master meter for your levels is there on the Pioneer on the middle. Obviously there's various different manufacturers, they all follow mainly the same design layout. Obviously the 2-channel mixers, they cram it in a little bit differently, but the 4 or more channel mixers like this one, obviously they usually use the same layout. Sometimes you get a VU meter, which is like a speedometer arm but points a needle, but they're mainly on old mixers. I think there was one bar I used to play out, I think it might have been a Vestax, had one of the masters had a VU on it. Yeah, sometimes the actual headphone monitoring, you have split Q and Q pan, and what that does is the split Q acts, the Q pan or headphone mix works like a crossfader, so it will blend both tracks together, what that sounds like, but in your headphones, not out through the master. And sometimes there's a split cue which you put both headphones on, you hear one up close in one ear and one the other ear. But with some mixers, what that can do is alter your meter. So some mixers don't have an individual level like that for setting your tracks input source level. They have one. Some tracks have one big one here which serves as a multi-purpose, and you'll have a switch to switch between input level and monitoring master. And also sometimes with the 1 meter like this that works as a multi, whatever channel that you're monitoring is what comes up on there. So if I switch to channel 2, then that'll change to channel 2. If I switch to channel 3 or 4, that'll then start monitoring the input level of channel 1, 2 and 3 and 4, and then if I press a button again, then it'll go back to monitoring the master. And so some mixers differ slightly, but this is mainly nowadays how mixers work. Like I say, sometimes adjusting the split Q can change the monitoring. On this one, I think if I set it to split, what that does is, now one side is what they call the program, which is the one level, and then you got the Q, which is obviously what you're listening to, and then you can monitor how close together the two levels are right there and then, by one being one side and one being the other. So this mixer actually has a multitude of monitoring metering ways. Obviously the most straightforward way is to just use it by using those meters to set your input level and then using that as the master. But when you use the split Q, it can actually help you by having them right next to each other, so you can get the sound level as close as possible for each track. So you have got options with this one. Like I say, some mixers do use a different way when you use the monitoring section. They can alter the way the l.e.d setup works. So you have to refer to your particular mixer's manual for any differences like that. Yep. So when it comes to mixing, like I say, we want to make sure we set the levels exactly the same. Obviously we've got this one going here at 0 dB, so we set this one going. This one's a little higher, and we would then back that off then to 0 dB, and then they're both at the same level. So obviously this track is, got to set that back off again because that was then coming to an end and it went down in level. But you can see that the two LEDs, they're both at 0 dB, which gives us the free range then of the up faders to mix with. You'll notice what I mentioned before in the first video about when it comes to setting up the crossfader, which I'll get more into in video 3, that there's on the faceplate there's some markings here which is likely to indicate a kind of a range of where the up fader should be for setting that dip in the crossfader. We'll get to that later on. When it comes to the actual mix itself and monitoring the mix itself, obviously this master level, this is the master level which I talked about before. Like I said to you, the calibration for some reason on this Allen Heath mixer, it seems to be 1 bar behind the input level. I'm not sure why that is, but we can still use it, the master, how it's supposed to be used, and monitor while mixing, monitor that and make sure that it doesn't rise higher than the, which is 1 bar below, which is the -3 where it's registering here, where it's flashing up to. So we can always make sure that it doesn't rise any higher than that. Obviously on this mixer it monitors the output, so when that faders up it's monitoring whatever's coming out. Bring that fader back down, and that one's down, nothing's coming out. The other channels are down as well, so nothing's coming out the master. Bring that volume level back up, it'll start again picking up what's coming out of the master. And then if I throw that one in at the same time, you'll see, there you go, you'll see that it's starting to wink up on a higher level now. So that's what happens. What you want to try and avoid when you're mixing two tracks together, it's actually there you go, it's winking up now because both tracks are in together. It's peaking in the middle, that's what I was trying to warn you about before. When you're mixing, you don't want to have a track come in that's too loud, that's louder than the track that's already playing, and a track that's too quiet, a lot quieter than the track that's already playing, because there'll be an impact, there'll be a loss on the actual impact on what you're hearing and on the dance floor itself. And that's why we set our levels the same, because we want to go from a certain level of loudness straight into the same level of loudness, so we don't lose any of that impact. But also in the middle, we don't want to, in the middle, say if we're using the crossfader for example, in the middle of the mix between the two tracks, we wouldn't want to have this problem here where it goes from being at a one set level to peaking up in volume like it is here, to then coming back down to that level again. And that's what we try to avoid by monitoring the master as we mix. Now you can get away with it by using the rotaries, which is what some people do, because you are still taking some of the volume away. Now a good trick to do when you are setting levels when you're mixing is doing your headphones when you set the one track off. Zoom forward into the track so everything's playing, because when it's just the intro, the beginning of the track, you've just got the beats playing, the percussion, and you don't get the full volume of the track. So if you zoom forward, or you could even use your skip buttons here to zoom forward, or you could hold the skip button down on these, I think you go like that, you go even faster through there, and let that play, and then you can set your level so you know that all the lead sounds and the bass and the percussion and everything is playing, and you can properly set your level. That way then you don't set it to just the intro where the beats and percussion are playing, and when you bring your track in it suddenly rises louder halfway through the track, and then that can create problems then, because you find yourself having to set the next track to that level so you don't lose that impact, and you end up creeping all the way through the mix, end up creeping and creeping. You probably end up having your level going from being down here for the beginning of the mix all the way up here, towards the end of the mix. And sometimes you will have problems with some tracks themselves. They will be quieter in places and louder in others. Sometimes intros can be really quiet than the main part of the mix, and that causes a problem with impacts, and they could be troublesome tracks to actually mix with themselves. Okay, another thing what I was talking about why we set it to 0 dB is that obviously we don't want any clipping, which is when it rises up into the red on orange or yellow LEDs. This mixer's actually got blue LEDs for some reason, but most have orange, yellow here, and then a red at the very top of the range to show when it's in the danger zone or it's clipping. Obviously we'll get distortion, nasty noises out your speaker, popping and everything, things like that on your recordings. But another reason why we do it is because that's set at 0 dB. Every increment, like that one there, plus 6 dB. It's all in dBs, so if I know that I'm going to put plus 6 dB, for example, on there, then it's going to go from plus 6 dB, it would be going in theory from 0 dB plus 6 dB. So this doesn't pick up on the rotaries adjustments, these meters, but some mixers meters do, and you can see it happen in real time, but these ones don't. But you can, but again, because it's at 0 dB, I'll know now by doing that it should be up here at the plus 6 dB, because I have actually put plus 6 or round about plus 6 dB on top of it by doing that, and it'll work the same the opposite way. If I cut minus 12 dB or 26 dB, that should relate on the meter. Obviously these meters, like I say, don't, on this particular brand of mixer, don't pick up on what you do on the rotaries, but you still know because you've set it to 0 dB that's where it will be going. I can't remember off the top of my head whether the Pioneer mixers meters do pick up on the things you do with the rotaries, but I think I had a new mark mixer and I think that did at once. So some do and some don't, but you know, if you set that to 0 dB, you'll know that whatever you do in relation to adding or taking away a certain amount of dBs will correspond to where it's gone from 0 dB. And when it comes to recording, this mixer has got one of the recording outputs. They lower the levels down slightly to compensate for any clips, pops that some people that might be a bit over hasty and have set the levels wrong and they're a bit too loud, so they don't ruin the mix. They got a bit of headroom lowered down, so they get away with that. The Pioneer one, on the other hand, it doesn't. I think it just has 2 master outs, and you have to adjust the master level down, and you might have to adjust the master level down even more to get a good sounding recording than you would usually just by a safe playing level out. So that's something to look at with different mixers. When it comes to recording, you might have to over adjust your safe recording levels. That's basically about it. Sometimes your levels might rise when using effects. That's something you have to worry about. The send and returns on this, sometimes it can cause your level to rise back up again when using any effects. Turn the filter on here. Don't know if I can make that rise up any higher than what it is. Just for an example, I don't know. No, we can't, but there's sometimes that makes the levels rise up even more. It's more of an issue when you're using your send and returns for an external effects unit like this. Sometimes your level can dip or it can rise, and that's something to watch out for as well. Now you can't hear any sound coming out of the system because obviously I've turned the speakers down because you want to hear me talk so that's why you can't hear nothing.